Well, I'm sure many of you have seen the recent saber sparring video I uploaded featuring Richard Marsden and Lee Smith, two historical European martial arts instructors. And there was a very unexpected comment on this video where someone said this kind of activity should be banned as it can be used to kill people, and this can be abused to inflict harm on others, and I support the ban on swordsmanship knowledge. And I'm sorry for singling you out here and criticizing you directly. No personal offense meant, but I do think this is worth discussing. And of course, to pretty much any martial artist this may seem absurd because, well, you're doing this. You know that you're not doing it with the intent to go out and assault somebody with a sword or with your hands and feet or whatever else. Martial arts are primarily about self-defense as opposed to assault, and they are also about self-discipline, improvement, exercise, health, a wide variety of things. To many people, it's also a meditative exercise. And there's aesthetic considerations and all of that. And at the same time saying this can be abused to inflict harm on others, that applies to a wide variety of activities and objects and so on and so forth. So that really doesn't say much. However, instead of just giving you my personal opinion, I actually did some research and came up with a few scientific studies. So let's look at those. So here's a study titled Martial Arts and Psychological Health, published in the British Journal of Medical Psychology, volume 61, issue 4 in 1988, which cautiously stated, whilst not entirely consistent, findings from studies of martial artists' personalities, outlooks, and behavior have generally indicated positive psychological effects of training. As I said, this is very cautiously stated. However, later studies are more explicit. Here is a review of the effects of martial arts practice on health, published in the Wisconsin Medical Journal in 2009. I quote, "Studies report improvement in psychological health related to martial arts practice, including anger management and sense of well-being, and decreased depression and sleep disruption." Another quote, "Research demonstrates that martial arts do not generally attract violent individuals or promote violence." So this debunks that claim right there. Although there's another study I'll get to right after this, which shows that sometimes violent individuals can be attracted to martial arts, but they become less violent over time. We'll get to that. It also says, a martial arts program for children at risk for violence and delinquency produced behavior improvement after 10 weeks of training. Levels of aggression and hostility were reduced the longer subjects participated in martial arts training. So this can actually be therapeutic. Martial arts can make children less violent. So again, evidence that shows that martial artists are no more violent than other people. And here's another study, an analysis of the relationship between hostility and training in the martial arts, published in the Journal of Sports Sciences in 1990. So this study compared the levels of hostility in martial arts, which is a combative sport, to rugby, a body contact aggressive but non-combative sport, and badminton, a sport without body contact and aggression. I quote, "No evidence to support group differences. Beginners attracted to the martial arts were more hostile, but the hostility declined with the duration of training." So again, this is actually therapeutic. Martial arts have a positive effect. They make people less hostile rather than more. The thing is, if you try to find significant cases of martial artists using their supposedly oh so dangerous skills and knowledge to hurt other people for no good reason, you won't find much. If you look, you'll find, for example, footage from surveillance cameras showing real-life attacks, beating, stabbings, that sort of thing. There's usually no skill involved whatsoever. Knife attacks generally are feral, vicious bull rushes where people just use the simplest possible motion, like with an ice pick grip, just downward again and again and again, or upward stab again, just completely out of their mind, just super aggressive, no technique, no skill whatsoever. Since people tend to get a lot more panicky about weapons, let's look at the evidence there. Here's a study published in 2009 in Psychology, Crime and Law, Volume 15, Issue 4, titled "Do Members of Shooting Associations Display Higher Levels of Aggression?" And I quote, "According to public opinion, members of shooting organizations, that is shooters, are thought to be more aggressive than other groups in society. Also, guns are generally seen as stimuli that elicit aggressive behavior." So this is just the public opinion. What's the actual science? Shooters and non-shooters were compared in measures of aggressive behavior, aggressive fantasies, impulsivity, and main personality dimensions, that is neuroticism, psychoticism, and extroversion. So this is a far more in-depth analysis than merely measuring something like blood pressure or violent thoughts when seeing a firearm. That was done in other studies. But those were non-shooters who were not trained with firearms. And since our culture overall associates firearms with violence, it's not exactly surprising that that's what people automatically associate, which, by the way, does not mean that they are going to become violent. Aggressive behavior is a different thing, which was measured here, along with aggressive fantasies and so on and so forth. Quote, "The results showed that members of shooting associations were less aggressive and impulsive than non-members, even when controlling for their tendency to present themselves in a more favorable manner." So the study was actually trying to make sure to eliminate bias. So definitely good methodology here. Quote, "A possible explanation could be that for shooters, their positively colored experiences with guns have changed the aggression eliciting effect that normally occurs when interacting with guns, the so-called weapons effect." That's what I mentioned earlier, when the reactions were measured when people saw a firearm present in the room. So what I would add to that is also the effect of training. Because if you take a safety course, for example, and you're trained in how to safely operate the firearm, but at the same time you also learn to respect it, because of course it can be a dangerous object and it needs to be treated with respect, then it just gives you a different perspective. And I'm pretty sure that's exactly what happened here. And that's also what happens in HEMA, Historical European Martial Arts. When you're training to use a weapon like a sword or any kind of other weapon, really, you learn to respect it for what it does, the effect it would have if used. It makes you think about that and you realize how horrible it would be, but at the same time you can still appreciate the art. And this is what HEMA is about to a large extent as well. It's a cultural dimension too, because it is trying to reconstruct history. Granted, the violent aspects of history, but it's history nonetheless. We humans are a violent lot. As a species, it was part of our history. And we've always been very good at, bashing each other's skulls in with various weapons and so on and so forth. But it's still a part of culture. And it is a very interesting thing to study, this art. You're also getting an insight into the mindset and what it was like to be in such a situation. And you can also appreciate the efficiency in these techniques, like the ingenuity basically of people who come up with ways to avoid being hurt yourself while disabling the threat. So there's a lot of dimensions to that, really, and it's fun exercise. So that's beneficial in and of itself, health-wise. So yeah, I hope this gives people a better understanding of what this is about. Opinion is one thing. If you dislike martial arts, if you dislike weapons, that's one thing, but here's what the science says. So if you choose to ignore the evidence, then you can be safely ignored. So to everyone else, thanks for watching.